Hey everybody. Interesting news today that I thought was worth a brief comment. So Preet Bharara, some of you may be familiar with. He was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, which encompasses Manhattan. Um, Probably the among the most influential positions in law enforcement in the entire country. He had really built a reputation as somebody who took on corrupt politicians in both parties. He sent both Sheldon Silver, who was the leader of the New York State Assembly, and Dean Skelos, who was the leader of the New York State Senate, sent them both to prison, convicted them on pretty complex corruption charges. And as certain people, I think, are unaware, Preet Bharara's office actually oversaw the investigation into Anthony Weiner on the grounds that Anthony Weiner might have solicited or engaged in explicit communications with an underage person. And it was that investigation which ultimately led to the issuance of the so-called Comey letter. Remember, on October 28th, James Comey authored a letter to members of Congress announcing that the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server had resumed. Well, the only reason that letter was came about was because there was this other investigation going on in Manhattan into the potential illicit communications sent between Anthony Weiner and a minor. And Preet Bharara's office was overseeing that investigation, which was why at the time it was so bizarre that you saw many Democrats saying, oh, this is some kind of partisan witch hunt, when Obama appointee Preet Bharara was the one whose office was overseeing this investigation into Weiner, which caused the acquisition of these new of the new emails at the time that were pertinent to the Hillary email server investigation. But whatever. Okay, so Bharara met with Trump during the transition period, so between the election and inauguration day, and the announcement at the time was that Bharara would be staying on as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Now, maybe going back, it would be, maybe in hindsight, it should have been clarified as to what length of time Bharara would be staying on under Trump. Would it be the full length of Trump's term? Would Trump renominate Bharara? It was never clear. I mean, so maybe at the time it meant that Bharara would be staying on during the Trump transition period, as on an interim basis, while Trump sort of got together his nominees and so on. But it's unclear. Anyway, Trump met Bharara went to Trump Tower and met with Trump, and the story at that time was supposed to be that he would be staying on in this position, and then yesterday, a directive came down from Jeff Sessions requesting that all remaining U.S. attorneys who hadn't yet been transitioned out of office submit resignation letters, or tender their resignations, and that wouldn't have been unusual because every incoming administration tends to want to replace U.S. attorneys who had been in office. But it seemed as though Preet Bharara would be an exception to this because he had reached some kind of deal with Trump during the transition period. So it's a little unclear as to what happened, but apparently, at least the public explanation for what happened is that Preet Bharara refused to submit a letter of resignation. And it's within the purview of the Attorney General to request such a letter, or request resignations, and then theoretically they could have turned down Preet Bharara's resignation offer. But weirdly, it seems as though Preet Bharara refused to submit any kind of resignation in the first place, which is just odd because every U.S. attorney serves at the pleasure of the president. So Trump could have just decided to let this particular U.S. attorney stay on because he has a reputation for going after corruption in both parties. I should have mentioned before that Dean Skelos, who is the majority leader of the New York State Senate, was a Republican, and Sheldon Silver was a Democrat. They were both extremely powerful. They were considered the members of the Three Amigos, those two, and then Andrew Cuomo, who basically run New York State government. So Preet Bharara basically upended the entire governance structure of the state of New York. And he got a lot of bipartisan plaudits for doing that. So it's a little weird how this sort of went down. Why would Preet Bharara decline to offer his resignation? Was it because he just on principle thought that it wasn't incumbent on him to resign when asked? Was it because he thought that Trump was sort of reneging on a deal that was made? It's unclear. There's sort of an element of mystery behind this. Another curious element is that Preet Bharara created a personal Twitter account on March 3rd. So just a week before this directive came down for all remaining U.S. attorneys to resign. Now, the speculation is that Preet Bharara has some kind of political ambitions and he's going to be running for office. I think that's plausible. He got a first-hand view of the rampant corruption in New York State. So I think he would be in a position to formulate a comprehensive critique of how politics is conducted in the New York State and run for office on those grounds. Which office would he run for? Well, Bill de Blasio doesn't have a serious competitor, and he's running for re-election this year as mayor of New York City. There doesn't appear to be a competitive Democratic primary at this point. Could Preet Bharara get together a formidable campaign at this somewhat late stage? It's possible. He could also run against Andrew Cuomo, theoretically, in 2018. But Andrew Cuomo has such a lock on the Democratic Party kind of infrastructure in New York State that it would be hard to see how that works out. There's part of me that suspects that there was an element of just political theater to this. So perhaps Bharara always knew he was going to be leaving office now, but wanted to get some hype and make it out to be more dramatic than it really was. Again, I don't know. That's just pure speculation, and I wouldn't report that as a journalistic fact. That's just sort of a hunch that I developed. Apparently, none of the investigations that Bharara oversaw are going to be altered as a result of this resignation or firing. His deputy in the U.S. Attorney's office is now going to be acting U.S. attorney. So it's not as if there's going to be a significant policy change as a consequence of this firing, at least in the short term. So I don't know. I'm curious to know what you all think. Bharara is a unique figure in that he seems to be heralded by basically everybody, because being annoyed with corruption is not an intrinsically right-wing or left-wing phenomenon. Everybody doesn't nobody really likes government corruption. I'm actually surprised that so many Democrats are so favorably disposed to him, are putting him out to be a martyr, even though it was because of Bharara, in a sense, that Comey letter was issued and that the election was swung, or at least that's what Democrats would have us believe, caused Trump to even win the election. So I thought that was just worth a quick video. I see some of you are commenting as I'm speaking here, and I try not to look at it too closely or else I'll lose my train of thought, so I apologize for that. Maybe at some point I'll try to do... Bharara was in charge of a local case that in my county on a corruption case that with the town supervisor. Would that be shut down? Now, I don't think that'll be shut down. I mean, I think his deputy would also have been involved in any such investigation, so I would presume that any investigation that had been going on now was just going to continue, but it's hard to say with any certainty. So, yeah, just wanted to do a quick video on that topic. Bharara is an interesting character. Be on the lookout for him going forward. And that's about it. See you later.